National Committee Rules and Bylaws Committee. Thank you to the members, thank you to those in our audience here, and thank you to all of you on YouTube and the live stream. I'm Jim Roosevelt, and I serve as co-chair of this committee, along with my distinguished colleague, Mignon Moore. Before we begin, please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now we'll turn it over to you, Mignon.
Thank you, Jim. The next item on our agenda is to call the roll. We are joined today by parliamentarian Sarah Markle. Sarah is actually one of only 5 lawyers in the world to have earned the credentials of certified professional parliamentarian teacher and a professional registered parliamentarian. Now that is an achievement. Achieving both qualifications is a rigorous process that requires extensive hands-on experience with a variety of organizations and individuals must demonstrate knowledge of at least 5 parliamentarian authorities, among many other skills. Sarah is joining us from Alabama, and we're so grateful to her for her immediately jumping in to assist us after hearing of Helen's accident. Thank you so very much, Sarah. Would you please call the roll?
Thank you. Co-Chair Moore. Co-Chair Moore.
Oh, here.
Co-Chair Roosevelt.
Here.
Mr. Applebaum.
I'm here.
Ms. Blanco. Ms. Brazil.
Aquí, here.
Mr. Brennan.
Present.
Mr. Burgos. Ms. Cardona.
Presente.
Mr. Curry has given his proxy to Mr. Applebaum. Ms. Daughtry. Ms. Dowdell.
Here.
Mr. Lathy. Ms. Fowler. Mr. Herida, excuse me. Ms. Kamarack.
Here.
Mr. Leone.
Here.
Ms. Lewis.
Here.
Mr. Locke. Ms. McGurk.
Here.
Mr. Martin. Ms. Martinez has given her proxy to Ms. Blanco. Ms. Blanco. Mr. McDonald has given his proxy to Ms. Daughtry.
Historic.
Mr. McGlinchey.
Here.
Mr. Mitchell. Ms. Mount.
Here.
Mr. Ray.
Here.
Mr. Saunders. Mr. Spite.
Here.
Ms. Swecker.
Here.
Mr. Thompson. Ms. Weingarten. Ms. Williams. Can you do Blanco again? Ms. Blanco, could you call that you're here? Thank you. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you.
We do have a quorum, which is 40% or 13 members present, and of course, we have many more than that. So thank you so much, Sarah. I will just point out that Sarah and Helen are good friends and often work together, so we have continuity in our parliamentary role.
And we both bring USC, University of South Carolina, law degrees.
Aha, all right, there we go. Therefore, highly qualified. All right. Before we begin with our business for the day, I'd like us to discuss the process moving toward our September DNC meeting. Thus far, we've defined a transparent process reflective of our party's values. We've fielded 20 state party applications and hosted 4 virtual listening sessions. for the public, alongside multiple committee meetings. After determining the most viable potential contests, we've hosted 16 state parties, and we'll hear one more this morning. Those parties have spent countless hours demonstrating how they reflect the specified qualifications while also showing Democrats just how strong and diverse our party is across the country. Moving towards September, we will now have the difficult task of choosing up to 5 contests to allow before the window. This isn't a responsibility we take lightly, and I know from conversations with all of you that we will need to continue working with parties to ensure we have all of the information that we need to provide the DNC with the best possible calendar for 2024. This is not dissimilar to what we did in 2006. Beyond the PowerPoints and the pamphlets, we continued working with state parties and their stakeholders to provide more information that will inform our decision as well as determine the viability of moving a contest to a state. We'll need to repeat that type of work ahead of our committee decisions, which is why we intentionally left time between the presentations and the meeting when we will determine the pre-window contests. Today, I'd like to discuss what type of information we'll be interested in collecting for all of you. We'll endeavor to bring this information back to this committee ahead of our July 8th and 9th meeting so we can spend some time then sharing our thoughts about it. Based on the presentations and the applications, do any members have thoughts on additional information that would help them make their decision? Yes, Mo Alifi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it would be very helpful, as we saw yesterday, all the various processes that different states use or need to go through in order to set a date, that it would be very helpful for us to have maybe in one place a metric that, or not a metric, just some sort of a sheet that shows what the different processes are and where each of them are in that process. There, a couple of states, particularly those that have require some sort of Republican cooperation as they get those signals publicly or as the legislature begins its maneuvering, just having all that in one place would be very helpful.
So, for example, we heard from one state yesterday that the state party, under their state law, has complete flexibility in setting the date. We heard from others, we've got to have a real agreement with the Republican leadership in the legislature and the governor. And they may or may not want to go public on that. So that range has to be covered. Yes, Stuart and then Joanne.
Thank you, Jim and Minya. I believe that we should also be looking for information that relates to when write-in ballot or paper ballots, when paper ballots are able to be received in each state in terms of whether or not they come in after the primary or caucus date itself. I think it's important for us to know what the results of a primary or caucus are going to be as quickly as possible, rather than letting that linger on for several days. So it would be useful, and I don't know this information at all, it would be useful to know for each state when we'd be able to bring to closure the results of a contest in that state.
Again, that varies in local law. For example, there was a primary here in the District of Columbia on Tuesday. Mail-in ballots will continue, are still valid if they're received by today. That would be a factor to take into account, that sort of thing. Joanne.
Thank you, Madam and Mr. Chair. First a thought, I know we have yet to hear from South Carolina this morning, but I just want to say I was so impressed with all of the presentations that were delivered. Of course, I want New Hampshire to be in the final result, but I felt such a great sense of pride of who we are as Democrats and who we are in America. And I just wanted to acknowledge all of my colleagues on this committee. My question is, can we get, I want to say, sort of almost a calendar of what our thinking process is supposed to be as we get to making this decision? So something that looks at a timeline, that we're requesting information now, we'll review the information, but what are the things that we should really be considering? Thank you.
Thank you. And I see two timelines that we want to look at. One is a timeline on our decision-making process. The other is a timeline that kind of works back from, here are the dates in the window, here are the things in our rules that have to fit within that, or the pre-window, here are the things that have to fit within that. That, for example, under our rules, no process can begin more than X number of days before the calendar year, that sort of thing. Anyone else? Yes, Artie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for everybody that gave presentations as well. And our diligence for all of us, and obviously Mr. Chair and Madam Chair in running us through a timeline and keeping us on schedule. Appreciate that. There were two things that I want to make sure, and I know I had brought this up on the first day, and working with the staff and the team on the electoral information, access to the ballot, voter registration drive process, language, in ballot languages, early voting. I think this access is an issue, and I think states are starting to go one way or the other, and it's a good comparison. So I know that the team is already working on that. I appreciate that. And then also just the diversity conversations of all, percentage of the state of not only the racial and ethnicity breakdowns of population, electorate if possible, and then the density of rural versus urban, suburban. I don't know how we can try to even do that, but it might be too much. But I think it's just a comparison of all the different component pieces. So, and I appreciate the staff for already working on a lot of this. So thank you.
Thank you. Leah.
Good morning, everybody. I want to echo the sentiments that have been shared regarding the depth and the breadth of the presentations that were made yesterday. I learned a whole lot about each of the states, and I'm grateful to have had that opportunity. One of the criteria that we referenced early on was diversity when we're considering how we might adjust or the calendar for the upcoming cycle. And I think it's really important as we think about diversity that we acknowledge that diversity is more than people of color, and that our party is more diverse, and that needs to be a factor. So diversity includes labor, it includes the farmers, it includes rural, because that's who we are as a party. We are farmers, we are manufacturers, we are college professors, we are students, we are stay-at-home moms, we are people of faith. We live in the South, we live in the North, we live in the Mountain West. We're Black, we're brown, we're Asian, we're LGBT. All of that is who our party is, and every part of our electorate, including the white people, need to see themselves in the early state process as having a voice that is important and that should be considered. And I say that because oftentimes when we talk about diversity, we're talking about people of color. And the Democratic Party, yes, we are the base of the party, but the party is so much more. And that has to be, I think, an important consideration as we are considering the calendar.
Thank you. Secretary Ray. Okay. Ms. Lewis.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. The other thing I wanted to echo about this committee that I think needs to be on the record is that a number of us were presenters. A number of us are advocating for our own states. But I think that we are all very clear-eyed about the decision that we have to make, and that decision will be what's best for our party. not what's best for our state. Yes, of course, we all want our states to be considered, to certainly be selected, but every member of this committee has a commitment to making sure that the final decision is something that is reflective of who we are as Democrats and something that propels our party not just to the present, but into the future. The one request that I would make in terms of information that we are gathering, we heard a lot of percentages yesterday, percentage increases here, percentage increases there. I'd like to see statistics. I'd like to see numbers, what those percentages represent. Because a 50% increase in one state of diversity is not a true 50% increase in terms of what's reflective in the country. So I think that as we are gathering information, it would be important for us to have numbers associated with those percentages so that we can see year-over-year growth in terms of what you are putting forth for the committee as we make our decision.
So a 50% increase if you had 2 union members
Exactly.
is not the same as
Basically,
if,
exactly.
as a 100-person increase if you had
Exactly.
if you had 75 union members. Okay. All right. Carol.
Thank you. I would like to see us figure out which states, I guess we could poll them and ask them, which states have flexibility in terms of the day of the week that they need to vote. That will help us, I think, as we start to plug states into a very small month, if we can, and it will help us space out the processes. If everybody is not on, doesn't have to be on a Tuesday, it would be worthwhile to know that. And there were 3 or 4 states yesterday who, in their very good presentation, said, we want to be first. We want to be the first state. Well, is that all they want? I mean, do they, if we can't put them first, would it suit them to be third? So those states who were quite insistent on being first, we need to know if it's all or nothing with them.
Thank you. I think all this information that people are asking for is going to be so critical. Another thing that I'm going to be looking for, and I think most of the proposals have them, but if they can be centralized, are sort of the ease of voting rules and what sort of the state of play in the voting process is also going to be very helpful for us to look at and look sort of taking what Leah said and taking it a step forward. We heard a lot of fantastic presentations yesterday, and can't be more excited to hear South Carolina's today. And it just made me think back to the start of this process when I think this committee made the decision to focus this conversation on a framework for the window as opposed to a list of criteria for states. And I think that's particularly important for us to continue to reflect on, and for the listening and viewing audience to also be aware that the whole goal of this purpose is to paint a picture of what the early window should look like as a reflection of who we are as a party. And we focused on 4 main values when we did that. That we wanted a window that empowered a diverse set of voices, that we wanted a window that was going to encourage an inclusive process, get as many people involved in it as possible, that we wanted a window that instilled confidence at a time when people are trying to shake confidence in our electoral system, but a window that instilled confidence, and 4, that placed us in a competitive advantage by getting our candidates in front of as many general election battleground state voters as possible. And so We do not have an easy decision ahead of us in many ways, but in some ways we do, right? Because all of the presentations, we will be proud of whatever decision we end up making based on the types of presentations we saw yesterday. Now it's just a matter of figuring out which combination of 4 or 5 allow us to paint that picture as well as possible. All of the information that that my colleagues are asking for here, I think will help us in determining that. But I just want to continue to encourage us to think about that. What does this process look like after the 4th or 5th state, however many we decide, goes? And can we look back, and can the rest of the country look back and say, that's the Democratic Party. That's who we are. And we can all feel really good about that.
Thank you. Yes, Donna.
Thank you. Much of what I wanted to say has already been said by my colleagues, and I want to first of all thank everyone for their wonderful presentations. I had an opportunity yesterday while in the beautiful state of Georgia. I'm not advocating for Georgia, but I had the opportunity to watch many of your presentations, and they were very good. I had a chance to dance. Clearly, I love Prince, and I had a chance to learn more about some of the wonderful things that you're doing in many of the beautiful states out here in the country. And so it really was, for us, I was proud to be a part of this conversation. 2 points, and then I'll give you my issue. I was a 16-year-old child when I took on the position as the youth coordinator in both Orleans and Jefferson Parish in Louisiana for Jimmy Carter. I was so in love with the Democratic Party because of what I saw at the convention in New York when Barbara Jordan stood up and talked about the Constitution. I didn't know if I wanted to be a lawyer, a doctor, or just, a politician or whatever, but she convinced me that I wanted to be a Democrat. So when the time came and when I turned 18, 2 years later, I registered as a Democrat. I have no regret whatsoever for spending my entire life in this party. This party has gone through so many transitions from '64 to 1984, when it told the story of segregation and, of course, finally coming through and becoming a party that could embrace a rainbow coalition, as we saw with Reverend Jesse Jackson. This party broke with tradition again by adding new states, 2 states that would represent the growing ethnic and racial diversity of our country. And what an amazing story we told when we added South Carolina and Nevada to our early state lineup. For those of us who are from the South, and those of us who understand how important and vibrant the West Coast has become, it really was a great story. Having served as campaign manager, deputy campaign manager, field director, regional director, down to the volunteer for so many presidential campaigns, I can tell you that this party is the party of the future. It represents America's future. And so, as we think about how we're going to make the decisions or the decision on whether it's 4 or 5 states and what states are added to the calendar before the all-important beginning of the 2024 presidential process, let us remember that when we expand our footprint, when we include more people, we win elections. This party has not lost a popular vote since 2008. Now, while we've come up short in 2016 on the electoral votes, we have not lost a popular vote. This is a party that continues to embrace change at every level. And when you look around this country and you look at state leadership, attorney generals, lieutenant governors, even those running for governor, we have diversity. We have inclusion. And as Leah said, diversity is a good thing. It makes us stronger. Inclusion makes it even better. We've never asked anybody to leave the room. We've said, scoot over and make room for others, and look around this table. We have made room for other people. So as we figure out our strategy and come up with our final set of decisions over the next couple of months, let us remind ourselves that when we expand our footprint, when we expand participation, we are more competitive and we are more able to tell the American story, not just the Democratic Party story. This is an American story, and I'm proud of it. And I just want to encourage every young person, if you're connected to the internet now and you hear my voice, I'm a 62-year-old woman who still got game. But I want you to have game. I want you to have a future that you can believe in, a country that serves your needs and values and interests. And I do believe that this is a party that is your vehicle toward that change in the future that you believe in. So please, come to us. We have seats at our table. And when you see an empty seat at the Democratic Party table, that's a sign that we need you to put your name. Come and put your name, because this party is open for the future. So, Mr. Chair, I just want to say that my point is expansion, expansion, expansion. Let's build the footprint, and they will come. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brazils. So I'm going to take a question from Mr. Brennan, and then our friends from South Carolina are ready to go forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hate following Donna. So, to a point Mo and I think others have made, I do think that we need to, as part of the materials that I think we're going to receive to evaluate, and I'm sure you all will do it, but let's reprint the resolution. I mean, that is supposed to be our framework, and I think sometimes, sitting here, we sort of lose sight of what we already agreed to were going to be our criteria. So if we make sure of that. And now I'm going to ask that terrible question, which is, any idea when the enormous number of volume of materials that we're asking for, we might see those? Because obviously we're meeting again July 8 and 9. It's a compressed time frame, and I'm sure we all want to have time to evaluate the materials, make sure that we understand what they really mean.
So we are planning on before the July 8th meeting. Can't give you exact timing yet, but we'll be working as fast as we can.
That's all I can ask. Thank you.
All right.
I just wanted to say that when we put together this resolution, we put it together thinking of a package of states, okay? And I want to say to my colleagues, I don't think I need to say this, but to everybody else, this should be evaluated in terms of the whole package, because no one state can do everything, right? No one state is going to match every single thing that we're interested in. So if we look at this as a package, I think that'll be evaluating this in the proper way.
Thank you. And on that note, we will move to our next phase here. I want to welcome our friends from South Carolina. Mr. Clyburn, thank you for joining us this morning. Trav Robertson, Mr. Executive Director, thank you. And our own Carol Fowler. So the floor is yours.
Thank y'all. I'm not here to persuade you to vote for South Carolina. I'm just here to introduce my friends from South Carolina, our very excellent state party chair, most of you know, Trav Robertson. And I don't need to introduce Congressman Clyburn because everybody who's ever turned on the news knows him. But I do want to tell you that way back in 1976, when we first had proportional representation in our delegate plans, was my and Congressman Clyburn's first experience with delegate selection rules. And we both wanted to be delegates, and he and I figured out that the white guys in South Carolina who always picked the delegates hadn't read the rules. And so
everyone on this committee can appreciate that discovery.
We realized they were assuming that they still got to pick the delegates. So we gathered our little gang of friends, and we went to the convention. So I'm very pleased that Congressman Clyburn was able to join us here today, and now I'm going to turn this over to Trav.
And let me just mention, the rules have been the same for every state presenting. Is it 15 minutes for a presentation, then we turn to 20 minutes of, up to 20 minutes of questions from the committee. Thank you very much for being with us.
Madam Chair, Mr. Chairman, thank you so very much for having us today. I want to take just a brief moment to thank the staff of the Office of Party Affairs, Veronica and Rick, and their tech team. They've done a fantastic job. Thank you very much. I also want to take just a moment to thank the state of North Carolina, the state of West Virginia, the state of Tennessee, the state of Arkansas, the state of Louisiana, for their letters of submission in support of South Carolina's First in the South. It really is a collaborative effort, and I want to say thank you to those states. And then I want to say thank you to this committee. In 2006, you provided the people of South Carolina and the South Carolina Democratic Party with one of the most extraordinary experiences and opportunity, and that is to operate outside the window. You did that based on several factors. The size of South Carolina, at 32,000 square miles, we're an easy state to get around. The ease at which we can set our presidential nominating date, the diversity of South Carolina's electorate, the affordability of South Carolina, and the accessibility to our state to candidates. If you'd put up the next slide, I think it is without fear of contradiction, since you have given us this a duty, that we have picked the eventual nominee and president at every single turn and moment. And my hope is that we will continue to do that. We believe we were successful in doing this because we have an open primary system. We have an extremely diverse electorate, meaning that we don't only have urban voters, but we have significant populations that live in rural South Carolina that forces campaigns to do retail politics throughout the state of South Carolina. And it's extremely important to note that our election system is run by professional civil servants who have always returned our results in a timely manner that has been above and beyond reproach. If you'll put up the next slide, please. I'm here to tell you that something very fascinating happened in our state. While other southern states are putting limitations and restrictions on access to the ballot, our state heard what you, the Rules and Bylaws Committee, told us that you look for in our delegate selection plans, but also what you look for in early nominating states, and that is access to the ballot. We have 2 weeks of unencumbered, no excuse, early vote, and just to put that in perspective, for the first time a week and a half ago, the majority of African Americans that voted, 70.4% of those who voted early in our primary a week and a half ago were African American voters, and 47% of those were women. I think that in the coming days, that's going to be an extremely important statistic. Would you go to the next? I just want to make sure you see these headlines because it was a powerful thing. The next slide, please. One more. 31% of the registered voters in South Carolina are non-white. 55.5% to 56% of the registered voters in our state are women. This map is a heat map that demonstrates where African American voters in our state live. And what you will notice is that it's not one county or one metro area. It is 62% of the African American voters being spread throughout rural South Carolina. That is something that forces our campaigns to do retail politics. And I would suggest to you that this body must look at how diverse our population is, but also where that population lives. It's not one urban setting. It is a group of voters spread throughout each county. And the darker you see on this map is where higher populations of African Americans live. But there is no doubt in the 46 counties of our state, with the little exception of Aiken, South Carolina, our population is spread throughout the entire state. And that is something that this body must take into consideration. In 2020, 65% of those who voted in our primary were African American or non-white voters. And if you would go to the next slide, something amazing happened. Every single state director in South Carolina was an African American. The members, the senior members in leadership roles were people of color. I submit to you that this occurred as a direct result of our state's diverse population. Think about that. We now have a group of political operatives who have dealt with campaigns at the highest level. That's not only good for South Carolina, it's good for America, it's also good for our democratic nominating process. You did that by giving us the opportunity to operate outside that window. The next slide, please. This is a slide that the Post and Courier puts up, and it demonstrates where the presidential candidates visit in our state. Now, Congressman Clyburn and Carol Fowler can tell you that these visits mean something to us because most of these visits happen at colleges or historically black colleges and universities in South Carolina. The Midlands host potentially 4 colleges that receive a significant number of interactions with presidential candidates. Think about that. These are young students who get to interact with presidential candidates in their campaigns and can alter and change the course of their lives forever. That statement cannot be oversold to this group in changing our country. And then the next slide. As a campaign manager, we can't break our candidates. We can't create a nominating structure that only allows those who can self-fund to win our nomination. We don't break the candidate. South Carolina is a cheap state to campaign for hotel rooms, meals, rental cars, and staff. But at the end of the day, this slide demonstrates something that I think is extremely important for those of us who are involved in politics. These are the 3 most expensive media markets in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. And as you can see, South Carolina's most expensive media markets for 1,000 gross rating points per week is almost $270,000 a week cheaper than the most expensive market in Georgia, and it's almost $111,000 cheaper than the most expensive media market in North Carolina. You can get from Oconee County to Myrtle Beach to Charleston to Jasper and Hampton on a tank or a tank and a half of gas and see hundreds, if not thousands, of voters along the way. As I said, South Carolina is roughly 32,000 square miles. Texas is almost 270,000 square miles, and Georgia is roughly 60,000 square miles. Our state doesn't break candidates. It gives them the opportunity to gain momentum as they march toward the nominating process. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Whip Clyburn. Congressman.
Thank you very much, Trav, and thanks to all of you for allowing us to be here this morning. I know that you are aware that a very, very, very important vote is about to take place on the floor of the House. The Senate did its work last night, and we are going to take this bill up momentarily. And so if I have to rush out, it's not because I'm running away from your questions. Though I don't mind doing that at all, but as you know, the whip's job is to count the votes. And we only have 3 votes to spare. You have to have 218 if everybody's present voting. We don't have a 220. And so I can't miss a vote here today, so I appreciate it. There are just 2 things I would like to add to what Trav had to say. Carol is right. We do have a very sophisticated campaign operation in South Carolina. And we have not shirked from our responsibility of keeping it that way. I fund every year something called Clyburn Fellows. We take 40 We've done that for 6 years now. 40 young and not so young people, and spent a year with them, trying to build a foundation for the future, but also trying to train people in Democratic Party politics that we hope we can export, and we are exporting around the country. And so that's very, very important to us. South Carolina has 4 distinct cultures. You've heard about the media market. If you're in Greenville, Spartanburg, Anderson, Pickens, or Kearney, what we call the Piedmont, you've got a culture out there that's totally different than that which is found in the PD, Florence down to Myrtle Beach. Florence to Myrtle Beach is agricultural. Piedmont, manufacturing. The Midlands, Columbia, that's where our educational institutions are to be found. In fact, of the 8 HBCUs in South Carolina, 7 of them were in my congressional district, around the Midlands. And then if you go down to the low country, Charleston, the tourism culture, and that's where most of y'all think that's South Carolina. Y'all go to Charleston and say, I've been to South Carolina. No, you ain't. You got to get out of Charleston, go over to the PD. So we have these 4 distinct cultures, and each one of them has its own media market. But all told, the most expensive up in Greenville is, as Trav just says, it is $110,000 less than North Carolina, and almost $300,000 less than Georgia. Those 4 things, when I first made this presentation to this Rules Committee, I talked very strongly about those 4 cultures. You saw that the winner of South Carolina has always gone on to lead the presidential ticket. Now, Hillary did not get elected president because of 2 issues. One that we don't like to talk about, the other, the electoral college vote, whatever may have caused the problems in that election, the problems were there. And I think that before it's all over, we're going to get to the bottom of what really happened with that election in 2016. And it was not our fault. She got 3 million more votes than Trump did. And so everyone that's come through the state has gone on to win the popular vote in the country since we've been doing this. So I think the proof is in the pudding. Finally, as many of you know, I grew up in the parsonage. My father was president of his church's presbytery. He spent a lot of time training me for the ministry, but I always thought you had to be called to the ministry. And I kept listening, and I just never heard the call. And so I'm not going to say I was not called, I just never heard it. So I didn't follow him into the ministry. But what I did do, I learned a whole lot about human nature, which I put to practice every day in my service here in the Congress. And so I believe very strongly that if the process is not broken, it doesn't need to be fixed. If there is a weak link, we need to strengthen it. There's a weak link in that process of ours. Strengthen the link. Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. I think we've demonstrated in South Carolina that we can provide the venue that's necessary for a candidate to hone his or her skills and do it in an affordable way, and then go on to capture the rest of the country. Those 4 cultures serve us well. Those 4 cultures will serve this party well all across the nation. I've learned how to speak in 1 minute. I'm there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clyburn, appreciate it. Trav, as you can see, time for presentation has expired, but we now have time for questions and answers. member of the committee have a question? Yes, Ms. Lewis.
Thank you. Yvette Lewis, Chair from Maryland. Congressman, so nice to see you again. And Trev, always good to see you.
Best dressed person I know.
So a couple of questions. First of all, one of the things that you mentioned that caught my attention is the number of visits that young people receive during this whole process. I'd be curious to know how that translates into turnout. Do they, in fact, respond to getting these visits? And if so, a template that possibly the rest of us could use in our states be helpful to us in the turnout of the youth vote. Are there specific things that you would suggest that we could do if, in fact, the turnout is something that that you can share with us? Also, one of the pillars is competitiveness. So, talk to us a little bit about South Carolina's in terms of the overall race. Obviously, it's a red state, I get that. But there are some things that you contribute, right, that make South Carolina viable in terms of being a part of this early window. So just talk to us a little bit about that.
I'm going to take the second question first, if I may. If you would put up the map of South Carolina, please, the heat map. Obviously, we've got North Carolina to our north, Georgia to our south, southwest, Florida to our south, and Tennessee. One of the interesting things about our state is, and I would say this not as a party chair, but as someone who spent his life running campaigns, there are two things that South Carolina have done for presidential candidates. Not only pick winners, but our primary gives presidential candidates the opportunity to develop a core group of volunteers and supporters that they then use in the general election to go to North Carolina and Georgia and even Florida to help them win those states. And so I think that South Carolina, because of that factor and our primary process, but also because of the split media markets throughout the border of North Carolina and Georgia, those split media markets have afforded those voters to see the primary messaging. And I would submit to you that that has not only helped our competitiveness, but it has also increased the purpling of those two states. But take 2010, for example. In 2010, Chuck Todd comes on television at 12:30 in the morning and says, while Democrats are getting slaughtered across the country, the surprise upset may be that a Democrat, Vincent Shaheen, wins the governor's mansion. We lost by 59,000 votes, and I would like to say that it was because of the great work of his campaign manager, but the truth is, it was because of the 2008 presidential primary that allowed him to almost win, because Chairwoman Fowler at the time and Jay Parmley kept those volunteers from the Obama and Clinton campaign engaged. And with the help of the DNC and the staff, they had a support staff, and Congressman Clyburn was campaigning extensively in North Carolina at the time. So we kept those volunteers engaged, and they helped us propel that campaign. Fast forward to 2020. Jamie Harrison, while the campaign didn't turn out the way we wanted, because of the presidential primary, there was a set group of volunteers, even though we had to change because of COVID. Jamie Harrison increased our share of the general election electorate by in between 350 to 600,000 votes, depending on what you use as the baseline. That is because of the foundation of presidential primaries and the core group of volunteers that are now accustomed to participating, and it helps us. I think the number of visits to HBCUs, I would suggest this. I would suggest it's not just a turnout question, because I don't have the numbers in front of me and I don't want to speak incorrectly, but there's no question that it motivates young people. I would submit that it engages these people not just to turn out, but to volunteer and work on campaigns and expose their worldview. And what's really fascinating is to see these presidential campaigns set up operations within a certain parameter of these HBCUs because they want those young people engaged in their campaigns.
If I may, I've been really surprised at two things recently. First of all, after we were able to develop this process here, I'm shocked at the number of young people that went on to get elected to the boards of trustees of our colleges and our universities. It's been amazing. I was shocked at that. They left our training, left the Clyburn Fellows, and now they're running the colleges and universities. And the second thing, I was in a restaurant a couple of nights ago, and to meet a young lady who has gotten married to a political activist here in D.C., and she said she wanted to meet me because she was a Clyburn Fellow and had never met me because of COVID. She didn't get her pendant ceremony. I'm sitting there talking with her, and another young lady walked through the door and came over to the table and says, she was in class of 2019, I'm in the class of 2020. They are both up here working on the Hill for Democrats. So we are exporting some pretty well-trained people around the country.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Next question, Artie?
Yes, sorry, thank you. And so great to see you, obviously Congressman and Trav, so great to see you as well. I wanna applaud you because I didn't see it in the application, early voting. Access to the ballot is a top issue. As Democrats, it is a core value that we hold, that everyone have access to cast a vote. So I appreciate that you expanded and added that you now have early voting. What are the other ways of the access to the ballot either has expanded or just currently still exist? But again, applauding you to making sure that actually happened in your state.
Well, I would like to point out that I wish that I could take credit for it, but I can tell you that I've testified numerous times, as has Carol, Congressman Clyburn, but our Democratic legislators in the House and Senate helped carry the water on this bill, and I applaud them. They're the ones that deserve it, but I want you to know that I passed along what this body's recommendation was. That bill passed unanimously. That's very unheard of in a southern state for a bill. Obviously, COVID taught us something in our election process, and I think that Howie Knapp, our executive director of the State Election Commission, and his staff recognize this, that we at some point, because our more learned population was more at risk during COVID and they run our polling locations, so there was a recognition that our absentee ballot program, you can still vote absentee, but that is transitioning to a mail program. And I think that that's going to be the wave of the future. During some of the questions, you all talked about mail programs and things of that nature. So you've got 2 weeks of unencumbered early vote. You've got 30 days of absentee ballot, which will be done by mail. Those are the primary ways in which we will vote in South Carolina. Then you've got Election Day. It's also important to note that each county, we have 46, each county has the authority to open satellite early voting locations. Now, those have to be established, so it can't be a mobile location like Charleston, South Carolina was planning. But the fact is if I'm not mistaken, they can open up to 7 early vote locations, but they have to be established locations.
Are those vote center locations, so anybody can show up at any location and vote?
I didn't hear the first part.
Vote centers, so is it a vote center where somebody can show up, it doesn't matter where they live?
You have to do it in the county in which you reside.
Well, the
in
county,
precinct,
yes,
right.
but within that county. if they have
Yes,
multiple.
early
you.
vote operates that way.
Thank you.
And every election commission office more than likely will serve as the early vote if one of those satellite locations is not established.
And one of the things I've asked some of my friends in the state legislature to look at, they would not allow Charleston to have a mobile unit.
Right.
But no one has spoken to the fact whether or not the staffs can be mobile. And I've asked them to take a look at that. Because if you're in Charleston, it's 100 miles long. If you're in McClellanville,
right.
The question is, can we send people to McClellanville, say on a certain date, and then send them over to Edisto Island, 100 miles away on a certain day? Or Edisto, because Edisto Island is no longer in Charleston County, but Edisto is. But that's 100 miles. So I've asked them to take a look at the next time around, whether or not we can move people during that 2 weeks, rather than moving the ballot box, move people.
Ms. McGarry. Then we'll come back. All right.
Quick question. Good morning, Congressman, Mr. Chairman. Question I've been asking all the states is how the early window affects your voter file pricing. Do you have a different pricing structure between presidential and non-presidential statewide candidates?
Go ahead, Carol.
I've heard this same question 2 or 3 times, so I'm not sure Trav understood the question, but 3 or 4 times, however many. But yes, we do. We do have a higher pricing structure for presidential candidates. Our pricing structure for local and statewide candidates is very low, just trying to cover the costs of maintaining the voter file and not trying to make any money. We want everybody. I mean, we will let, if you're the president of your precinct, we'll let you have voter file access for nothing to organize your precinct. So yes, we do try to keep that cost down.
Congressman, you got to go.
Call the votes, and please, thank you so much for allowing me to be here.
Thank you very much for joining us, Congressman. We appreciate it.
And I would just like to add.
Good luck with the vote.
I'm called the king of layaway, meaning that I want everyone to have access to the voter file.
Antonio, did you have another question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, welcome. Great presentation. Those of you who don't know, Mr. Chairman has the greatest collection of hats.
But no hair, no hair.
Well, there's a reason for the hats. Mr. Chairman, thank you again, and Carol and the leader who just left for your presentation. It was great. One of the questions that I had for you is, you have in South Carolina an emerging and growing Latino community. And it's such an important segment. Look, what we're seeing numbers in the South, Southwest, where Latinos increasingly are looking at the other party because they claim no communication has happened in these different states. What kind of a plan, number one, do you have for outreach? Number two, in terms of communications, whether it's television, radio, in terms of the Latino area, and people on the ground?
Well, I would sit here and be completely disingenuous if I made up and said X, Y, and Z was happening. The fact is that in a state like South Carolina, we can always improve on that. You know, having lived in Oklahoma for a while, I learned a great deal as it relates to that community. I will say that we have made some strides in South Carolina to the extent that we've elected our first Hispanic county party chair. Down in Beaufort. She didn't run this last time. We have an executive committee woman from Newberry County, and we have actually focused on electing some of our Hispanic members in Oconee County, which is a Republican county, to local offices. The fact is, Tonio, we need to improve dramatically in that effort. And our hope is that one day we will garner the resources in which to do that. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that we're 100%. That would be disingenuous and not true.
But we have made a good bit of progress in that regard in the last several years, and we have a robust Hispanic caucus within the Democratic Party, and we are leaning heavily on that caucus to help us improve our outreach programs.
So I'm going to volunteer Maria, Artie, and myself to come and help you guys.
You just love down.
We're flying out tonight. Come on. And just to touch on what Carol said, we have under Jamie and Kay Kuntz developed a caucus system that is very, very active, and our hope is that when we could provide some more staff support for them, that they will continue to grow and flourish.
Hi, Molly Meeker.
Ms. McGarry?
Yes. Just a quick question and more curiosity, and I apologize I didn't ask this of Nevada. Can you all talk about, was there a learning curve when you were added to the earlier window for the '08 elections? And if so, can you talk about the difference between that first presidential election cycle going in this earlier period and your infrastructure now? Like, how long did it take?
I'm going to defer to my mentor, Carol Fowler, here to answer that question.
Thank you.
I'm not old enough to be anybody's mentor. But yes, there was a learning curve. Having one of these early processes is, if you are the state party chair, you are truly drinking from a fire hose for months. The candidates began flowing into the state, but I will say that in 2004, before the establishment of these outside the window states, South Carolina had a party-run, very excellent party-run primary that was early. And we had a good bit of candidate attention for that. So we did have that experience going into the '08 election, but I think I didn't, as a state party chair, anticipate that we would have huge operations set up in our state all of a sudden 6 or 8 months before the primary. And so much activity, and the campaigns demand a lot of the party. They expect somebody there paying attention to them, whatever level of campaign they have. They want attention at the state party. So yes, there is a learning curve, but it's good. You know, it's not, I sure wouldn't complain about that experience. It was a wonderful experience. And I will tell you that in the 2008 campaign, as the state party chair, I got to know a lot of these campaign people who came into the state. And I knew in August, before our January primary, I knew who was going to win it, because I could see who was doing what on the ground that other people couldn't see. So I learned a lot about how you run a campaign also from that. So yes, it was tough. It was sometimes stay up all night, get ready for this. And there's a little nervousness. We did switch over to a state-run primary, so that made it a little easier. But still, handling the media, all of that, you have some sleepless nights, but it's very satisfactory work.
Any other questions for the South Carolina delegation here? Yes, Donna.
Can unaffiliated voters participate in the primary?
We don't register by party in South Carolina,
Okay.
and our primary system is open. So
That's why
once
I couldn't
again,
figure it out.
yes, ma'am.
You cannot vote in two parties' primaries on an election, but yes, anybody could come and vote.
And am I right to assume that unaffiliated voters are the majority of voters in your state?
Well, everybody's unaffiliated. Oh, you mean people who would self-identify if you called them up? Yes, people say they are independent voters in South Carolina. Many of those are not, but there is reluctance to identify with the party.
In the early 2000s, that number was roughly probably about 55,000. And I got to that number based on lower tier candidates on the ballot, that you would see those candidates' races determined by, about a 55,000. That number probably has grown to about 150,000. I think that Jamie, I can't recall specifically, lost between 150 to 200,000 votes. So I would say that while anyone, when asked, would identify as unaffiliated, that number's probably in the 150 range, maybe 200,000 range.
Also, in your slide presentation, I noticed that you had one graph about Black women's participation. I couldn't capture it all. What was that about?
So that was the press surrounding the staffing of presidential campaigns in 2020. And I think that was a CBS News article and an article that ran in the Boston Globe that talked about the influence that African American women were having in the nominating process and in the actual campaign staff structure during the 2020 presidential cycle.
And have you seen an increase in the number of black women and women in general running for office as a result of their electoral participation in presidential politics?
Without a doubt.
No question.
Without a
No
doubt.
question.
It would not bother me to have women in every single elected office. Right now, women outpace men in voting in between 250 to 300,000 more women than men vote in the last two election cycles in South Carolina. And I think today, Madam Chair, it's only going to prove more critical based on the information that just came across all of our phones.
I would be remiss if I didn't say this, but since you already got the documentation in your presentation, as a Southerner, we're so proud of you and the way in which you have conducted your election. So I just wanted to personally thank you for that.
Well, thank you. Carol will tell you that after the 2020 primary, I was overcome with emotion because I didn't screw it up. But the fact is that weighs very heavily on me, and one of the reasons I was very nervous coming in here today, frankly.
Just real quick, because I think we're out of time. That slide and some more information is in this book that we handed.
They can't hear you.
Oh, was I not heard? I just was saying to Donna that that slide and some more information about your question is in this book.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very enlightening. Again, thank you for all the good work you've done over the years.
Thank you to you.
Losing Elaine Kmark, and I think Donna is going to explain to us why.
Thank you.
Oh, Mignon, are you?
You got it? Go ahead.
Well, me, Donna, whoever, go ahead, Donna.
No, go ahead, Madam Chair.
Well, what they're referring to
Madam
is-
Chair, can we just, a point of order for a second? Brian has some news to report.
That's what she's gonna report.
Oh,
Okay, I think it's the same, is it the same news, Brian? Yeah, okay. So I'm just gonna read just a clip so we'll know just how severe this is. So the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade Friday, holding that it's no longer a constitutional right to an abortion. The opinion is the most consequential Supreme Court decision in decades and will transform the landscape of women's reproductive health in America. Going forward, abortion rights will be determined by states unless Congress acts. Already nearly half of the states or will have passed laws that ban abortion, while others have enacted strict measures regulating the procedure. And I suspect what we can all say is elections matter, voting matters, and this is what we get when we don't vote.
It's on.
Yep.
But most importantly, I think it's incumbent upon women who felt that nothing would happen, everything would stay the same if they voted a certain way or if they didn't vote. You know, we have a responsibility to each other as sisters, to look out and protect each other. And then we have a responsibility to educate and uplift men so that they are supportive of our right to make decisions about our reproductive health. These are decisions that should not be determined by anyone except a woman, her husband, or her partner, and her God, if she believes in God. But this is not something that should be part of any kind of political conversation. I am absolutely heartbroken. Not heartbroken for me. I'm not at the age where, where I will be having children, but I am at the age where I'm still making choices about my body. I have a daughter. I have nieces, I have friends, I have sisters, and I care about them as much as I care about myself. And Democrats, I'm telling you, if we don't take this seriously and start living in the future like Republicans do and anticipating what they're going to do and reacting to everything in the past, we are going to stay behind the 8 ball, always having moments like this, and I will tell you, I am tired. I'm tired of moments like this. I've been tired for a long time, but today is my breaking point. I'm tired, and it's our fault. It's our fault when we don't show up. It's our fault when we sit back and say, oh, it's okay if we lose an election here or there as long as we stand on principle. It's our fault. And Democrats, enough. Enough. Wake up. Vote. Make a difference. Your votes are suppressed right now because you sit back and you take it. It's time to stop. I'm sorry.
And I'd just like to point out that there are contrasts out there. There are states that have already enacted laws to codify in their state law the rights that are encompassed in Roe. Those kick in today in Massachusetts, for example. And there are other states with Democratic majorities in their legislatures and supermajorities to override vetoes even of Republican governors. And that's how we can make a difference. Anyone else like to speak?
Vent? Yes, please. I want to echo what Yvette just said, but even be more particular in where we, frankly, excuse my language, fucked up as a party, which is the conservative movement has for 50 years organized around the Supreme Court as a narrow, focused, laserly focused issue in terms of voting. I can't tell you how many people I know on the Republican side that Donald Trump turned their stomach, hated him, but voted for him anyway because of this, for this issue only. They organized around this issue, they raised money around this issue, they created media around this issue specifically to flip the Supreme Court, and they were massively successful. While we put our heads in the sand, didn't think Supreme Court was sexy enough of an issue to mobilize around, and this is where this has brought us. And we have to make the Supreme Court a mobilizing issue, however we need to do that, pointing this out, pointing out voting rights, pointing out every single thing that we know is wrong with what the Supreme Court is going to be deciding from here on out and have been. The gun issue, just, last night was egregious in and of itself. We are seeing our society's downfall because of this. And we need to fix it.
That the Senate that was led by McConnell gave us this.
Yeah, right.
And we should never forget that these judges in the lower courts.
That's right.
He focused on these judges.
That's right.
And if we think the Senate is not important,
Right.
all we got to do is sit back and watch. Because this is a McConnell-led movement. Trump just happened to be sitting at the top. But this is why rules and bylaws to me is important, because he understands the rules. And he rammed those judges down, even at the lower courts. So we have trouble all across this country. But it all goes back to, why do we sit back and let them lead this stuff? Because we are either too emotional about not voting or too emotional about voting. So one way or the other, we pay the price.
Madam Chair?
Oh, yes.
I joined Yvette and everyone else on this incredibly bad decision. I have a daughter, I have 2 granddaughters and 2 great-granddaughters, and I want them to have the ability to decide for themselves what they can do with their body and what they can do in making those decisions. The right to decide is a right that they should hold for eternity and not a right that gets taken depending on a political cycle. Now, I'm going to say something very controversial here, and I don't want to offend anybody, but in 2016, 56% of white women voted for Donald Trump, knowing exactly where he stood and what he meant when he said he was going to pick the judges off the list he was given. So we're not surprised, but we have to join this fight. We have no other alternative, and my brother Brian here wants to add to this in terms of where we are in our democracy.
All right, Brian to follow on, and then Stuart. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. As the new guy and the more reserved one in the room, I thank my friend here from New Jersey for encouraging me to step up to the mic. But we're here as Democrats, and I think the operative word there is democracy. And the rails of democracy are thin, and they're getting thinner every day. So while we sit here and debate in terms of which state goes first, I think the most important thing when we end on this note today is to organize and to take action. We have responsibilities in each of our communities. We witnessed an attack on the Capitol, which, no disrespect, we don't need congressional hearings. We watched it on TV live. We need action. We need accountability. We are on the precipice of a very dangerous time in our history. And collectively, it's incumbent upon all of us to take action. So I thank you all for being here, and I take our role on this committee seriously. And I think as sad as it is on a day like this, hopefully it will send a unifying signal that will resound across our great country and unify us during this time of crisis. Thank you.
Bravo.
Stuart and then Mo.
This is a horrendous day, and it reminds us that every single one of our freedoms is at risk. We cannot delude ourselves into thinking that something may not happen, that it cannot happen here, because it is happening here. I'm always going to remember Susan Collins saying that she wasn't worried about what the Supreme Court will do. She was, at best, deluding herself. And we cannot allow that to happen anymore. And what that means is this has to be a wake-up call for every person in this country that we have to stand up and we have to be active. And it also shows that what we are doing here today is so important because it is about protecting our democracy and protecting our freedoms. Thank you.
So I actually just want to piggyback off of something Stuart just said. So we do some polling out of our institute at Georgetown on polarization. And there's a lot of scary stuff in there. But in our last poll, there was one really interesting data point to me. We asked voters, what value do they care the most, do they want to see the most from their elected leaders? We gave them like a list of 10. Number 3 was respect. Number 2 was sort of social responsibility. Number 1 was freedom. The single greatest value that voters wanted their elected leaders to react to demonstrate, was freedom. Democrats have a real opportunity right now to harness this anger, to harness this sadness, and to reclaim freedom. To remind people that Democrats are the ones that are fighting for, we're not trying to take anybody's rights away from them, anywhere. Those are the other people. And so I think the fight in the days and the weeks and the months and years to come is going to be profound. It's going to be multidimensional. It has to be, because it has always been on the other side. It's going to be multidimensional, and everyone around this table is going to play, I think, multiple roles in that and in drawing that distinction. This committee right now is part of that fight, right? We are now setting the foundation to ensure that Democrats stay in the White House so that then next time there's an opening on the bench, on the federal bench, anywhere, that we've got a Democratic president making that appointment. We need to give that Democratic president, this one and future ones, more allies in the Senate to make sure that they actually get confirmed. Because going back to that value, again, the most important value that voters in this country care about, freedom, we're the ones fighting for it right now.
We have Ken, Donna, and Joanne.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just, I wanted to piggyback on what Stuart mentioned, because this is, as I've said in recent weeks, this is really much wider and expansive than just reproductive rights. And to what Mo just said, it is an opportunity, of course. But I will just say, and I want to read this from Justice Thomas's concurrence real quick here, because Thomas's concurrence makes it very clear where this court is heading. He said, "For that reason, in future cases, we should reconsider all of this court's substantive due process precedents, including Griswold, Lawrence, and Obergefell." So if we think, again, that this is limited to just reproductive rights, it's much more expansive, as Stuart mentioned. And I hope that people, I shared this with some of you the other night. I had a young activist say to me recently that, when is the Democratic Party going to realize it's okay to lose an election to prove a point? Of course, the answer is never. And here we are standing on the precipice of seeing things that people have literally fought and died for in this country taken away. People think that the right to vote is guaranteed. The right to marry the person you love is guaranteed. The right to make decisions over your body are guaranteed. None of it is guaranteed, and every single generation, every single person in this country has to be vigilant and stand up and fight these fights anew. I think, again, as you're reading through things this is a very expansive opinion, and we are in store for many fights to come. It's a sad day for this country. It's certainly a sad day for people who were on the front lines of these fights many years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Donna.
Well, suffice to say, we began this week with Juneteenth, a celebration of freedom, a jubilee, a moment of joy that came to the people of Texas almost 2 years after blacks were finally freed. Civil War had ended. The news had come to Texas, and people knew they were free, but there were no federal protections. They waited for General Granger to show up with those federal troops, many of whom were black, to know that they were free. Free. I grew up in a household that the word freedom wasn't a word that we saw in a dictionary. It was how we perform our daily lives, because I grew up with grandparents and parents that had no freedom. So being one of the first in my family's history to have that freedom, it meant that I didn't have to suffer the same indignities and the same immoralities as my grandmother and her mother, when people could rape you and you had to bear that child. You had no right. And unless you could get a back alley abortion or somebody who will allow you to have that, you carried that child. You look at my family, we come in every color, because we carry children that we had to carry. This is a moment of moral clarity for all of us. It's about our freedom. Freedom. I'm Catholic and I'm pro-choice, and I've always been proud to say that I dared anybody to deny me communion because I believe that freedom was essential to who I am as a human being, my humanness. I'm going to tell y'all a story I've only told to a few people, and bear with me. I'm the third of 9 children. My mom was a maid, my father was a janitor. That is okay to say. They raised us right. And when one of my sisters, because she had brain surgery, could not function, my parents said we would always take care of her. And we did take care of her. Someone raped her. And my daddy, because my mom died early, my dad said, we got to take care of Sheila. He took care of his cousin when she was raped. She had a back alley abortion. I'll never forget listening to those stories. He said, you go take care of Sheila. We took care of our sister, folks. Can you imagine what it's like to be poor in America? To have nothing. To have nothing. To wait for that check and know that you owe people and you can't even pay your bills. And now you got to deal with this and you got no way out of no way. I'm not going to leave the people behind in Mississippi. I'm not going to leave poor women. I'm not going to leave I'm not going to leave no woman behind in this struggle. I'm going to speak up and speak up and speak up and speak up. And if I offend somebody, that's okay. But if you believe in freedom, you stop acting like this is some damn word in the dictionary. This is about our lives. My mama bore 9, my grandmother 12. I didn't have him born 1, but damn it, that was my choice. But there are women today, y'all, they won't have a choice. They won't have the right to take this constitutional protection. I cannot believe I'm sitting here. I didn't know where I would be when this happened. I was hoping I would be in New Orleans at some bar drinking with somebody and not thinking about nobody in D.C., but God dog, I'm here with you. And maybe God needed me to be here with you because I know I'm here with people who will fight like I will fight with every damn thing you got. Amen. But don't leave Sheila behind. Don't leave anybody behind. Don't leave no family member behind. Don't leave no relative. Don't leave no poor woman, especially in the South and other places where the restrictions are going to go into effect now. Give what you can. Urge everybody to help people. This is about our lives, folks. This is about our lives. I can't tell you in any deeper way that this is my life, your lives. And, you know, being pro-choice and Catholic, it's been my great honor to go sit in church, to walk up to get that communion. I smile every time I get it because I say, you know what? Jesus ain't never condemned nobody for this. Jesus, I don't know Jesus as well as some of y'all might know Jesus, but I know one thing, Jesus was not a hater. Okay? This is a hateful decision. Every time I open up, you see I had to put this down. Ken, I'm glad you read it, because you know, there's a part of me that, I cuss. And I can't believe. And of all people, Clarence Thomas. We have no right to privacy. I'm going to keep it there because y'all know. I'm going to let my sister handle it because y'all know I can go there. Y'all know I can go there. I got a nasty mouth when I want to. That's why I wash it out with Chardonnay. Potty mouth. But let me tell y'all something. I've always told my brothers and sisters, everybody, you think this is just about my body? They're coming for you and who you love. They're coming for you too. They always will come. And when they start weakening the pillars of voting rights, they've been coming for all of us. Now they have come. And you know what? Either we're going to meet this moment as true Americans, or we will go down as an American democracy. This is about our freedom, folks. And I want everybody in this room to understand, when you leave here today, you're on the front lines. I don't care if you're 62 and can't give birth. As I tell people, Sarah gave birth in the Bible to Abraham. I ain't got no Abraham, but damn it, I'm 62. You never know what God might do with me, but I'm going to tell you one thing. It will be my choice. But we're going to help poor women, y'all. And we're going to have to stand up and say these things and say things that are uncomfortable to say about abortion and the right to choose and the freedom to own our own bodies, rape, incest, Lord have mercy, no exceptions. And we got to endure this, folks. So please, I hope you all understand why this emotion is coming so deep from within. Because it's my grandmother now talking to me. It's my mom. And my sister, my dad didn't even make it through that last year. He tried. He had cancer again. And no sooner than my dad died, who pledged after my mom died to take care of my sister Sheila died. And he was her biggest defender. He's the one who carried his first cousin from a back alley abortion bleeding out. And he was the one who told us to take care of our sister. I'm going to do it for my dad and my sister. I'm going to fight hard. I'm going to raise my voice. And I just want you all to raise yours too. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Joanne?
Thank you, Donna. I just want to make a couple of observations about what we're talking about here today. We're talking about freedom and we're talking about rights. But the Supreme Court just affirmed the right to bear arms, to carry arms. The overturning of that New York case, over 100 years of precedent.
Sullivan case.
This, if we stay clear-eyed, we can see what is in front of us, and it is very, very dangerous. Which brings me to 2022. Because votes, as my sister Yvette said, have consequences. And then it brings us back to why we're here this week. We have a very important decision to make, and a decision that could influence, and we need to keep the frame clear, but could influence the outcome of elections across the country. Elections that we need to win. We need to mobilize. And this isn't just about the Democratic Party, it is about our democracy. So Republican women, Republican men, independent women, independent men really need to understand what we are dealing with. And that's an opportunity for our party to send those messages and to welcome people into the fold. We need to stay clear-eyed. Votes have consequences. And we are standing on shaky ground at this point. We are standing on shaky ground, but we can together overcome. We have in the past, and I believe that we can in the future. And I will leave it with that.
Thank you. So, okay. So, does anyone else want to say anything? Because I think with this decision, feel free to say whatever comes to your mind, because I think we're going to probably adjourn after this. I'm not sure as much the call for the convention might not be as, relevant today. I think, you are leaders in your own hometowns, and I'm sure people are calling you, trying to get responses. So we want to honor that and respect that, so.
I guess the thing that's really eating at me the most is how they've put this whole issue into a silo. You know what I mean? They've put it into one silo. And there are a lot of people, male and female, that don't understand the female body, that don't understand female anatomy, right? It's not just about some willy-nilly decision to terminate a pregnancy. Are you going to sit there and watch your loved one die because she has an ectopic pregnancy? Do you even know what that means? Do you even understand what that means for the life of a woman when she discovers this, through no fault of her own, is happening inside of her body and can kill her? Do you understand that? I would strongly suggest that all of those that are sitting back making the decisions, you learn about the female body. And then find a way to live in the female body and then make that decision. But until you can do that, you have no say. None.
I'll just say one other thing. While we're thinking about the very specific consequences of this decision, I think it's really important that we think about and talk about the fundamentals of power. 6 people just told every woman in this country what she can or can't do with her body. Unelected people who have no recourse have said what the Constitution means to and for all of us. There's a fight here that is so much bigger than this heartbreaking decision. And Republicans have, as Carol was talking about earlier, they've known the rules. They've been fighting for this. They've been putting this together patiently for since the decision was made, since this right was acknowledged for us. When we talk about institutions and what we believe in and what we need to strengthen, the Supreme Court is, as they have said, the most dangerous branch. And we put a lot of focus and attention on on the legislative and executive, but this is terrifying. It's terrifying on so many levels. And it's a place that people don't understand. It's a place that we don't put enough attention and focus on. And we're a big party in a big tent, and we care about lots of things. But we have to think about how to make this simple for people to help, so they understand the gravity of the choices they're making. And I like to lovingly joke that we're Democrats. We can't say anything in less than 10,000 words because there's a lot to say. Because there's a lot that's wrong and there's a lot that's right about this country, and we need to talk about them both. But none of it matters if we can't get to 50% plus 1. We need to understand the fundamentals of power and think about it and talk about it and address it and direct and guide our guidance and direct our party in that direction. Because these most fundamental things, as you said, things that no one ever imagined we'd be talking about. I see women and on many issues walking around, men and women, thinking that these are just things we just never thought we'd be fighting about. And so, again, I just think it's really important to remember that on this, on guns, I think it's crazy that, these very people who were excited to get additional protections for themselves because of a threat of violence against them for their decision have said, oh, it's totally fine that everybody can carry a gun to protect yourself, outside your house, whatever, willy-nilly. It's mind-boggling. The rules are different for different people. And a group of different people have decided for me and for my family things about my health, and it's infuriating. And so while we're thinking about these very specific decisions, I think that we need to focus, and we need to focus the attention of the American people on why this happened and how they're doing it. And they're doing it in ways when they're not even giving opinions. They're doing it on, a docket that, they don't even have to explain. It's such a dangerous time. And I just hope that we can
Carol, then
highlight it.
Leah.
Thank you. I just want to build a minute on what Joanne said and on what Tanya said. Elections have consequences, Joanne said, and Tanya just said some really smart, good things. But I think it's incumbent on the Democratic Party to provide for women and men in this country a civics lesson. How many people voted for Donald Trump not understanding that when they did that, they would give him the power to appoint these Supreme Court justices who would then do this. There's still people out there who don't get it, that their vote had an effect on what the Supreme Court does. So I just think it's up to the Democratic Party to point that out. I don't think they teach civics in school anymore, but I think we need to teach some civics to the American people, particularly to the women of America.
Bishop?
You know, I think my fourth great-grandmother was born in 1789 in what would become Savannah, Georgia. She was forced to marry my fourth great-grandfather, who lived on the plantation of Charles Daughtry in Georgia. They had children when the slave master said they could have children. Their children had children when the slave master said they could have children, and they married who the slave master said they could marry. I'm the first generation in my family born with the right to vote. The most dangerous thing I think about this decision is Justice Alito's reliance on the concept of originalism. In his decision, he says because abortion is not mentioned in the original Constitution, there therefore can be no law about abortion. There is no right to abortion because it wasn't originally mentioned. Well, in the original Constitution, black men were 3/5 of a man. We going back to that? In the original Constitution, women were not mentioned, black, white, purple. We going back to that? How much of the original Constitution are we going back to if we're going to now make decisions based on originalism? I'm not going back. Lincoln freed the slaves in 1863. I'm not going. That's 100 years before I was born. I'm not going back. I'm not going back to a time when someone else could make decisions about who I could marry, where I could live, what I could eat, what my family would look like. That's what this decision is leading us to. And we have to be conscious. This is not about abortion, y'all.
That's exactly right.
It's not about abortion. I'm pro-choice, but this is not about abortion. This is about our freedoms and our ability to make our own decision. This is about power.
Yes.
And who gets to decide. So when you think about it that way, the decision about gun rights is not different from this decision. There's no contradiction because it's all about originalism. It all goes back to the same root. We have amended and changed our Constitution to reflect the realities and the principles of our nation. We have to decide if we are going to be the country of 2022, the country of 1965, the country of when we amended and allowed women the right to vote, when we allowed black people the right to vote, and an ever-evolving and changing experiment of an American society, or are we going back to 1776? Who are we going to be, and then how are we going to fight for the soul of our nation? How are we going to fight and not get caught up in the language and the minutia which always kills us as Democrats? And let's fight for the bigger thing, which is what is our country going to do? Are we going to see the promise of America become the practice of America, or are we just going to go along with the flow of the current moment and fight about and make them, and what we say, Mignon? Majoring in the minors.
That's right. That's right.
Or can we come up a little higher? Give each other some grace to fight for the things that are going to make. I'm worried about my nephews and what kind of country they're going to grow up in. My niece is 4 years old. She had her first graduation yesterday. What will she and her life look like when she's old enough to vote, if she has the right to vote. Because will she? I don't know. So I think about this and I'm emotional because of my fourth great grandmother Eliza and all that she endured so that I could have the right to vote. All that she believed and that she stayed breathing and she stayed living despite the indignities that she had to endure and that my fourth great grandfather had. They stayed on this course because they believed in this country. They believed in this God that allowed them the freedom. And now I stand today, and what am I going to do? What are we going to do to ensure that the promise of our ancestors and why they came to this country, why they stayed living, why they stayed breathing, why they stayed working, why they stayed fighting, are we going to press their case forward and be the embodiment of their hopes and their dreams? That's our responsibility as Democrats. That's what we believe in, and all of us we do a lot. We on this committee, we pay our own way. That's right. We spend a lot of money. Say amen, somebody. That's right. We're committed to this party. Whatever we're doing, we got to do more. We got to redouble. We got to go get somebody. We got to knock on. I'm not a door knocker. I'm going to be a door knocker because it's that important. It's that important. That's all.
Anyone else? Well, Artie?
I appreciate this time to have this conversation. And I am angry and I am pissed and I am devastated, but I know that we will all do what we need to do where we live, where we organize to show up and not take this. Because for some group of people to tell me that me as a woman am no longer an equal citizen in America, to have my own choices. As Leah says, I spend my money that I make, that I bleed for, that I sweat for, to come and be dedicated to this labor of love and the love of this country. When these people will still say that my people don't belong, keep them in cages, not allow them the full rights. Children that have grown up here, gone to college, try to get a job, and now have to fight for a work permit. And we have not done our justice to my people, to my cousins. That border, my people did not cross that border. That border crossed my people in the Southwest. And we continue to just bypass and take everyone for granted. My cousins. And we all have our own individual stories and struggles of what makes up America. Some immigrants are more special or more important than other immigrants. This country was built by immigrants, people leaving their lands from persecution, but only special people, only certain people. But again, I am an equal citizen in America. I was born here. I'm going to continue to fight. And I know I come from a small state. I talk about where I grew up from. I always say I'm a first-generation American, but I'm a second-generation union member, activist, and second-generation Democrat because we have always fought for freedoms. And when people say Democrats don't have a message, yes, we do. My story is my message. I care for people. I care for my brothers. I care for my sisters. I am not in this just for myself. But yet I am not American. I am not an equal citizen of this country because 6 people want to make a decision that is more important. And Sister Brazil, yes, I am also a pro-choice Catholic. I am a lector at my church to this day in Las Vegas, Nevada. I believe in my faith to Jesus and what he presented to me. And I've had my conversations with my priest and have said, I know what conversation I will have with my God when I am ready. But who am I to tell somebody else what their faith is and whether or not that equals to mine? It's not about that. Our faith should be in each other. Our faith should be in this country, this freedom that we fight for every day. And today it is clear they're against us. They don't want us. They don't want to expand voting rights because when we vote, we win. And I am done with that. I will always keep fighting. I will always spend my money because I love this. My daddy taught me to show up, show out, do everything you can to win and do the right things. I believe in Jesus. I will be at church on Sunday. I will be talking to my fellow parishioners. I'm going to be talking to everyone. And if any woman that needs a safe haven and has services come to Nevada, we have codified it. This changes nothing in the state of Nevada. So let's keep fighting for this. Everybody has to step up. We got to keep fighting. That's all.
So I would, as a Eucharistic minister in my Catholic parish, I'd like to associate myself with Artie's remarks about her relationship with her parish and with her God. Thank you for putting that so clearly, Artie. And Judy, did you want to add some comments?
This one? I rarely offer my opinion in public because I am so passionate about the things that I do and the things that I choose to do and, you know, friendships, the world, whatever it is. I'm just always like over passionate about everything. The ladies have spoken before me, did an awesome job. Everything has been covered. However, I just want to say, when I look at them, whether it's on TV or in person, because I work for the Florida House of Representatives, and you know Florida is really fucked up. So if it's in person or on television, I really think Monday couldn't get any worse. And then there's Tuesday, and it gets worse. And then there's Wednesday, and it gets worse. So over this past year, from dealing with my governor and seeing where Florida is going and America is going, y'all are like shedding tears and thinking now, the whole 60 days during session, I cried every day. Every day. Because I was mostly having to talk to and try to soothe my members who was getting skull dragged on the floor. And I can't see me working for them and not helping them to get along. But I don't want them to be used, abused, you know, talked to like dogs. This, you know, whatever they were doing, the bills that they were bringing up. And I'm saying all of this because this is how I've made it to this point in time today, this second. I pray so much, it is unbelievable. I pray so much that when we get a teeny tiny break, I do what I call a victory lap in my office, which is run out and run all the way around in a praise to see that God is still in charge. And ladies and gentlemen, he is still in charge. And you know what? Just like we get tired of this mess, he does too. And let me tell you something. God is the worst of avengers. You don't want to start messing with God's people and not think that it is not going to come right back around the corner on you. So we may be thinking now and, teary-eyed and everything, but just please, if I don't ever get a chance to speak to you again, which will be very seldom, please know that God is still in charge. They don't believe fat meat is greasy, as we say in the South. They don't believe that it can happen to them. Everything that they audition out, they have got to deal with it themselves. And then you'll see a different reaction because John, who is a devoted elected official that's having an affair in the streets, he can't take care of that if that comes up. Then there's the daughter that young people now are fighting just like we're fighting. Some of them have more of a spirit than we do. But the young people now, they don't see color. They just love each other. They love as friends, but they love in relationships. These white people cannot take their white daughters going with black people or their white sons going with black people. Those kinds of things, when you come home and they find out that somebody in their family is pregnant and they can't use the abortion, see the rules, you make the rules, but you got to follow. You understand what I'm saying? Okay, because they're going to lay the ground rules out there. They're going to say no ifs, ands, and buts about it. And that's what we need to be saying. Okay, no ifs, ands, and buts about it. Because what you give out is what you're going to get. And we are going to watch your crazy ass. We going to keep numbers on your disrespectful ass. I've done my tear part. I'm just angry as hell. And I'm not going to try, I'm not a person to sweeten anything. Like I told you, I'm passionate. I will get with it. You don't think that when I get out of here, when I get back to that Capitol, every day, it better be somebody in that courtyard. Because if not, I'm going to remind them, we have to fight. We have to stay in this bloodstained battle. We got to act like we are what we have been pretending to be all this time. I'm a member of Donna's Club, the 62-year-old, and I used to go around and I used to beg and try to inform people and do. I don't do that shit no more. If you can't see where you headed, yes. If you can't see where we're headed, so be it. I ain't got time to tell you why you should be out voting. I'm not coming to pick nobody up. I'm not doing anything. Because your ass should see how these people, they are actually trying to do us in, folks. Yeah. And some of y'all will make it because you're white males. Everybody else is going to be screwed. Okay, everybody better get together. But I thank you for letting me have my little blowout. My tantrum. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, very briefly, I just want to say how honored I am to be part of this group of dedicated, talented, passionate, and eloquent people. And together, go for it. And together we can work, educate, vote, and fight. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. All right.
Thank
Let me just say that it's important for us all to have the opportunity to speak. The call to the convention deserves our full attention, and therefore we're going to postpone it to July 8th because we cannot focus on it right now. We will focus on it then. We'll have a lot to focus on between now and then, and what we're talking about today will continue to be our focus going forward. So we are going to defer that. We will also, at that time, continue our work on the charter and bylaws amendments, and Carol Fowler, the chair of our working group, will report to us on their progress at that time. That therefore concludes our agenda for today. I want to thank our parliamentarian, Sarah Merkel, the DC Bar staff, the AV technicians, our court reporter, as well, in particular, our Rules and Bylaws Party Affairs staff. Thank you to you all. We will be in touch a lot between now and then. Thank you for everything you've done over the last 3 days, and there's a lot more to come. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? And a second. Without objection, we are adjourned.
Just want to make sure everybody saw that the president is delivering remarks at 12:30.